You're not going to reach your net zero targets, whether by 2050 or 2060, if you don't include hydrogen in its various colors, particularly green and blue, in the energy mix. So I think it is going to be an integral part of the future energy mix. I think the problem is scaling it up to reach these targets, very ambitious targets that are being set by various governments.
Do you think they're attainable then? You're describing them as very sort of difficult targets in a way.
If you look at targets that have been set in the past, you miss a target, you raise it again. I think the technology is moving very quickly. I think it's not just the technology exists. We know hydrogen is there, it's everywhere. You can convert this bottle of water I've got here into hydrogen by splitting molecules. The problem is it's still very expensive. So it bears down to cost, it bears down to scaling up, huge projects, and that's going to take time. And you have to bring the cost down. Whether you can do it with or without subsidies is the question.
So is there enough investment in its production at the moment?
At the moment, no. I mean, if you look at the projections of how much investment is needed, and I'm going to have to look at my notes for this one, because the Hydrogen Council, which has more than 30 countries as its members, says that total investment of 300 billion will be needed for all announced projects to be realized. But to date, only 80 billion worth of projects are either operational or commissioned. So you have a big gap. And if you look at the major projects that have been announced, particularly in the Middle East, you have the 5 billion project in Saudi Arabia and NEOM. That's not going to come to be operational till 2025, or at least that's the target date. But those mega projects tend to sometimes run, behind schedule. So I think it is a big challenge to scale it up. And there are some skeptics.
You're obviously saying this isn't a quick fix. Nobody's going to just tap into hydrogen and solve the world's energy problems. But the point I'm trying to make is, how much attention is blue and green hydrogen getting from governments? And how interested are they around the world, especially perhaps the poorer governments, because of the level of investment they would need?
Well, exactly. And I think that's why I say it's very fragmented at the moment. There is no global market. And if you're going to have, green or blue hydrogen, it's going to be mainly to decarbonize these really hard to abate sectors, steel industry. Morocco is investing in hydrogen as well. They produce a lot of fertilizer, which which needs to be greened, which needs to be, produced in a cleaner way. So, you have in the UAE, they are using hydrogen to decarbonize their steel production. So, the technology is evolving, and there are ways in which you can actually use hydrogen for storage, for example. So if you have interruptible supplies, if renewables are the biggest investment we've seen in the electricity sector is in renewables. It's more than 50% in the last year. So that requires storage, and hydrogen provides a solution. So, I mean, it's a multifaceted, the uses of hydrogen are quite varied. You can use it to decarbonize heavy industry. People are looking at aviation and shipping, but I think that's a long time coming, because you can't just put it in the tank.
No, and if you look at the aviation industry say there's not enough investment to make that happen anyway.
No, I mean, if you look at the IEA's projections of what is needed, I mean, green hydrogen is currently only 1% of the global market. So you can imagine how much it needs to be scaled up if you're going to reach these targets. I think.
But isn't that a big incentive for the biggest CO2 emitting countries to invest in it, and quickly?
Well, yes, they are. I mean, for the United States, I think it's going to be more for its internal use. But if you look at the infrastructure, for example, for hydrogen fuel cell cars, there aren't really that many stations where you can fill up. So you've got some in California and maybe one on the East Coast. So I think that's what really needs. You can't put the horse before the cart. Well, the cart before the horse, so to speak, because that's what a lot of countries are doing. Now, I think for the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they accept that there is a need to develop these new technologies, hydrogen, blue hydrogen, green, or whatever color. I think you can even have pink hydrogen in the UAE, because they can use their nuclear power. to produce it. So, but they also say, you know, hang on a second, you're still going to need liquid fuels, you know, particularly in the transportation sector. So they're preparing for the time when maybe demand for oil and gas is going to start declining, oil before gas, obviously. But, you know, you look at Europe at the moment and we have shortages of gas in Europe. So people are burning coal. It all boils down to supply.
Which seems to be a process that's going backwards.
Well, exactly. You know, coal is supposed to be phased out. So I think it's very difficult to get the balance right. And
what are the incentives around, do you think, Kate, to persuade governments they've got to get moving? I mean, they got moving over COVID and the pandemic to find a vaccine. Why can't they get moving quickly enough on energy?
Well, I think it's, again, it all boils down to supply-demand fundamentals. At the moment, you don't have a proper market. So you can't really gauge supply and demand. You can't really plan. I mean, all these governments have in their 2050 net zero scenarios. They all have, you know, hydrogen is a component of these scenarios. So I think you need private public sector partnerships, you need access to finance, and you need to, you know, to remember the 1 billion people in Africa who have no access to basic energy. So I think that's where the problem is. And you have the skeptics who say, hang on a second, you know, it's probably cleaner to just burn. I think there was Cornell University had an analysis the other day saying it's actually cleaner to just burn gas than produce green blue hydrogen. So, you know, there are still challenges.
So the jury's out. Kate Dourian, many thanks to you for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you.